So Desiree, the event that we are co-facilitating is called Tending the Threshold. And I'm wondering if you could describe in your own words how you see the threshold upon which we stand as humans living in these times.
Well, I see the threshold of this intersection of race and this real kind of the struggle with what whiteness is that's happening currently for folks. And I think that while the election of 2016 may have kind of incited some folks, it was always there. So we're becoming browner and younger. Humanity is becoming browner and younger. And so all of these old systems and institutions are really struggling with what does it mean to become irrelevant and to slide into the background, right? So humanity, we know, we have this thing, we're born, we mature, and we have a choice at this one point that says we evolve or we die. And whiteness, that tool of whiteness, is at the point, it's at the threshold of what does it become next? How does it stay alive in its current shape? Do we need to reimagine what whiteness is? How will it function in a new world and system? Or will it die off? And I actually don't think white supremacy will let it die off. I think the evolution of whiteness will make it become even more deadly and more potent. And it will not shrink, but it will think about ways that whiteness evolves so that other folks are let in. So at other points in history, when whiteness was threatened, what it did was it allowed other people to become white, right? So at some point, it allowed Greek folks to be considered white and Irish and Italian folks to be considered white, because it won't just shrink. It will do whatever is necessary for it to stay alive.
I have to be honest with you. I have to feel my feet and my seat, because when you said I don't think it will die, I felt a surge of nausea. You kind of know something, or you have that ominous feeling of knowledge, and you articulating it is a very foreboding feeling.
Yeah.
So
it's throughout history, it has evolved, but it has never not been this tool used for supremacy.
I think this is a good time to educate people who are not familiar with your work. Could you describe your work in diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Sure. I'm a consultant. I'm a facilitator. I'm a trainer. I'm a teacher. I'm a community member. I'm an activist, and I use activist last because I am not in the street activist. I'm someone who supports activists as they do direct action and do work in the streets. But I am one that hates the word diversity. I think it's been bastardized. I think it means it's just a checkbox for most institutions. And folks, they think if they have one brown person in the room that they've hit the height of progressiveness and inclusion. And inclusion is about shared power. So when I talk to organizations and institutions and people that hire me, I really only focus on equity, inclusion, and justice. If we don't have justice as a core part of this work, then we are probably causing more harm than good.
So how do you see equity and inclusion playing a role in helping people address these large-scale cooperation dilemmas that we have, like injustice around, race or gender and environment, climate?
So we don't have any shared language that we all understand. So we think the goal is equality. But equality comes from a place that so equality is like, we start off all at the same place. So we all have the same needs. And we think that that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
Equity says we don't all have the same start. And because of that, we don't all have the same needs. And I'm going to give Carmen what Carmen needs to get where we want Carmen to be. I'm going to give Desiree what Desiree needs to get Desiree where we want Desiree to be as a society, as humanity. Those are going to look incredibly different.
Mm.
So this sense of fairness, and I say fairness with kind of a, is because there is no such thing. We're not all the same. We don't all have the same needs. And so the solutions for each of us are not going to be the same. So let's stop talking about equality and let's talk about equity. And let's talk about inclusion, which is really about shared power. And let's talk about power hierarchies, right? And then let's talk about justice. Because once the person, when we're in a room, whoever is that most vulnerable in the community, if their needs are taken care of, then Carmen, your needs are taken care of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we think that these concepts and this work is really about us just knowing one another and building communities, when that's not true. They're actually about how are we going to give up power? How are we going to share power? Because it's not about, will I sit down and have a meal with you? It's about the systems that have segregated us, right? It's not that we don't live in the same neighborhood. It's about the institutions that have made sure that didn't happen. And that it's difficult to happen.
Mm-hmm. I would imagine that your work, you're working on changing systems or working at the human scale to help that to happen. But I have to imagine that you spend a tremendous amount of time at the threshold, at people's thresholds of comfort, at the threshold of their knowledge, at the threshold of their identities.
All the things.
Can you flesh this out a little bit for me? How do you do this every day?
All the things. So I use a framework that I gotten from, there are a couple of frameworks. I love frameworks. There's a couple of frameworks I use, and one is by Barbara Love, and it's called the Liberatory Consciousness. And I've taken that framework and I've built some work around how do you build liberatory relationships. But liberatory consciousness has four parts to it. The first part is awareness. That's when we're at the threshold. We have something that you're like, no, this is not what I was taught, right? We have that moment where what is happening and who am I and how will I respond? And so we have to do our own work, our own awareness about our privilege and our identities and what that means to navigate the world with them, and how do we show up, in what ways, what's dominant, what's not. And then from there comes analysis. And that's the deeper our analysis, the deeper our understanding of the systemic issues, not the Carmen. Carmen's nice. Carmen said something to me that was kind of not so nice. But, that was just Carmen, microaggressing me. Okay, but let's look at that broader view around why. What was missing in that education that Carmen got? What was missing and why Carmen didn't understand what was happening? So there's this internal work that we do constantly, and then there's the external work that has to happen. And we can't do them separately, because we know people who only do the internal work stay frozen and never actually do anything. And people that only do the external work really do this work from a place of anger and pain and trauma, which keeps us where we are, in pain and anger and trauma. And so we have got to come at it with a deeper analysis, awareness analysis, and then the next step is actually action. And with a deeper analysis, I know the next right action, or the next action that will probably do the least amount of harm. But we usually make decisions from awareness and not from analysis. We make it from this place of feeling like, oh my God, I love Desiree, so I just want to help Desiree, and I'm just going to do whatever it takes. So I want Desiree to know that I really love her. It's not what Desiree needs. Desiree needs housing, and Desiree needs work, and Desiree, these things that we need an analysis to help Desiree get what Desiree needs. So our actions need to be from analysis. And then after analysis is accountability. Who's going to hold us accountable for what we did, for the choices we've made? Who's going to say, you know what, Desiree, that was so not what was needed in this community at this time? And how are we going to make reparations? Or how are we going to apologize? Or you got it right, and we really appreciate that. I mean, so that's the framework, that inner work, that awareness. A lot of us like to stop there. We like to read the things and talk about the things, but not do the work. The work comes from the analysis and the action.
Mm-hmm. And I really appreciate that it arrives at the communal scale, the collective, the communal.
The collective is actually, yes, definitely.
Yeah. So why are you personally drawn to participate in the Tending the Threshold event?
Because I think we don't have enough conversations about this. I know some people are like, oh God, I talk about it all the time. But we don't talk about it in, I think, deep ways. I think we still very much talk about issues of race and gender and class on a very one-on-one level. And I'm like, no, if we're talking solutions, then we need to dig deeper. And we need to have conversations that challenge us, that make us uncomfortable, that push us to learn more, to read more. You know, I teach a year-long course called Freedom School. And one of the reasons I love it is because for me, it's all the things that we never learned in school. This is us going out and getting our own education around these issues, around this learning.
Where do people find out more about Freedom School?
Oh, my website, DesireeAdaway.com. You can find out about Freedom School. But yeah, it is, you know, digging into these intersections, right? Like, how does whiteness affect immigration? How does whiteness affect what we think about as democracy? How does whiteness really look at who we determine as being a citizen and what we determine as being truly American, right? All of these have intersections that I don't think we look at enough to really understand just how deep oppression goes within our communities and across the globe, right? Like how deep anti-Blackness is globally.
Mm-hmm.
And what that does. How much white people, we never talk about how much white people lose by never being around people other than white folks. We always talk about what other people lose, but we never talk about, you know what have y'all lost by being isolated and segregated and alone?
Mm-hmm. I was about to say, I feel strangely thrilled to go and spend time, but then I can edit out the strangely, because I think you just spoke my mind. You just articulated what it is. It's like there's something very compelling about standing at the threshold and recognizing there's things that I've lost because I've been raised white, and that maybe there's an opportunity to bury some things that need to be buried and then just see what happens. I don't know how to vision beyond that. You're talking about things that I can't even imagine but
Well, I
I'm
don't know.
so thrilled.
I have my freedom school this month. That was their homework, to go and reimagine whiteness.
Mm-hmm.
We know about it in its current format. You know, the colonizer, the settler, the imagine what it would have been like if this tool of whiteness was not built for genocide and exploitation, if it was used to be collaborative and communal.
Mm-hmm.
How would our systems look differently?
Mm-hmm.
How would our hospitals be run differently? How would we get access to capital differently?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just even what would my world look like?
Yeah.
What, I can't wait. I can't.
And it's hard. It's super hard to imagine, because we've never lived one day without white supremacy.
Yeah.
And we've never lived one day without the patriarchy. So we're like, wait, what? I can, but that's what oppression systems do for us.
Mm-hmm.
They take away our imagination.
Mm-hmm. And I guess we'll see. We're going to have a pretty diverse group, I think, or, like at face value, it would appear to be 3 countries, many different ways of expressing gender, many different parts of even the U.S., even though most of the facilitators are coming from there. So I'm really excited just to see what happens when we sort of hang out at the threshold and ask these questions.
I'm excited too. Like, how can we challenge dominant ideology?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be an interesting soup. Very flavorsome. Thank you so
I love
much.
it. That's my favorite place to be. An interesting soup.
Thanks so much for spending time with me today, Desiree. We'll see you in Ashland.
See you in Ashland.